Sunday night, we thought perhaps Eben was getting sick. We thought, oh, he's getting the flu too. But we didn't think that much of it.
A little bit of a cough, but so did the rest of the family. And then that night went to sleep fine.
But neurosurgeon Dr. Eben Alexander wakes up with pain far beyond a simple cold.
The next time I went back up, and I just peeked in to check on him, and he was having a seizure. He was writhing, just really, really agitated and shaking. And I said, "Say something." And he couldn't say anything. And so I immediately called 911.
They took him in an ambulance over to the hospital.
He was so violently agitated at that point. It took 9 people to hold him down, to put in the IV.
Then, Dr. Alexander falls into a deep coma.
It was rough. I remember when I first walked into the hospital, I remember very clearly when I first saw him there, and the room wasn't lit at all. And I remember getting close to him and then finally stopping. It just looked like all of the life had been sucked out of his face.
He was in a coma all that time, but there was that one moment, and our priest was there and heard it with me, that we heard him scream, "Help me, God, help me." And I said to our priest, he spoke.
But those were the last words that he said.
Tests reveal Dr. Alexander has a rare antibiotic-resistant strain of bacterial meningitis. Ironically, this disease attacks the brain, his medical specialty.
Somebody in that situation really only has about a 1 to 2% chance of survival.
But simply surviving won't be enough.
One of the doctors said to me, "I'm really concerned about his mind." That meant that his body could survive, but he would be a vegetable, that his mind would not be there. And that brought on a bout of tears. Probably that was my worst moment that week.
It was just such a mystery because they kept on giving him doses of triple antibiotics and absolutely nothing was responding.
I definitely thought he might not make it.
Eben Alexander is slowly inching toward death.
For the vast majority of time, death is a process. It's not a moment in time. Most of us actually think of the moment of death as when your brain dies. That's when you're actually, as a human, likely dead. And that moment in time is not clinically easily delineated.
Eventually, life runs out.
They reach a point where the blood pressure goes to 0. They no longer have a blood pressure, and their breathing stops. This then usually is still accompanied by the heart giving electrical activity. And usually at the very, very end, you'll see a few gasps of last breath. And then you finally flatline. That's when we typically clinically declare someone dead. There have been situations when a patient is thought to be dead and then is able to resuscitate themselves or comes back. So we're very thoughtful and careful about this process before we declare someone clinically dead.
A respirator keeps Dr. Alexander's body alive, but meningitis has ravaged his brain.
The most disturbing thing to me was when the nurses would come in and lift his eyelid and shine the flashlight, the pen light into his eyes. He made no response. The pupil didn't get smaller or bigger, and that was not good.
Normally, you want to have a reaction where the pupil will constrict, and that means that those parts of the brain that control that are functioning. The fact that his pupil response was not there, it means that the bacteria had gone so far as to affect some of these more resilient structures in the brain.
To his family, Dr. Alexander is virtually brain dead. In Dr. Alexander's hospital room, there is also little hope. But then,
on Friday, day 5, I felt that he was probably squeezing my hand. He would kind of try to open his eyes. It was so amazing.
He actually did open his eyes, went to pull the tube out of his mouth, and then he was breathing on his own.
The doctors said, there's been some help here other than us. We hardly knew what to do except to bask in the miracle of his being here.
but soon, the family realizes that despite the miracle, something seems off.
Even from the first few seconds when I was talking with my dad, I could tell that something wasn't right. He almost seemed like a zombie. He wasn't the same person. He didn't have the same amount of life in him that he had before. That was probably one of the scariest points, seeing, all right, now that he's back, is this who he's gonna be for the rest of his life? Did it really take a toll that bad on him?
Dr. Alexander says he too went on a journey during his coma, but it was very different from Christina's.
I existed in this underground, boiling, muddy, surrounded by dirt and mud. I had no memory whatsoever of my human life, had no words, no language, and just this pounding, monotonous machinery-type sound deep beneath me. A strong sense of roots, black, fine roots. It seemed to go on for years and years, if not eternity.
Dr. Alexander's near-death experience is far darker than most.
A few percent of near-death experiences contain frightening imagery and are actually frightening to the near-death experiencer. Now, we don't know why some people have a frightening near-death experience and some don't. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with that individual's prior lifestyle, their beliefs, anything at all.
I have no memory of my life. I have no words, no language, no knowledge of humans or this universe. Just this bubbling, foamy, dark underground.
Suddenly, Dr. Alexander's experience changes.
And then, out of nowhere came this spinning melody of light. and it opened up like a rip in the fabric of that reality. And I was coming up out of this darkness into this beautiful, verdant valley. And I was a speck on a butterfly wing. And these choral chants would come to me as these colors in the billowing clouds against the deep blue black sky. One of the most precious memories was that indescribable comfort of that unconditional love, with the divine presence coming through the entire scene.
And this incredible understanding of that. You are here to learn many things, but you're not here to stay. You'll be going back.
Many people who have had NDEs come back and they are completely flummoxed by how powerful that love is at its very core. And I think just being able to convey that to this world in meager language that we have to try and describe things.
After his coma, he has not necessarily become more religious, but he's definitely become more spiritual.